Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to call this meeting to order of the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission on October 3rd, 2018. May we have a roll call and determination of a quorum?
Daniel Henderson, Michael DiMartini,
Here?
Bill Hauk, Michael Drinkwater, John Enlow, John Flansburgh, Mickey Hazelwood, John Martini,
Here.
John Combs,
Here.
Dave Solero,
Here.
Mervyn Wright,
Here.
John Zimmerman,
Here.
Harry Fonstock, Thomas Payette,
Here.
Mylin Nguyen, Cindy Turchek, Ron Penrose.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, now is the time for public comments, and there's a 3-minute time limit per person. I do not have any public comment cards, but is there anybody that would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll go on to item 3, which is the approval of the agenda. This is an action item, possible action. We have a motion for approval by Commissioner Hawk.
Second.
A second by Commissioner Solero. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item is approval of the minutes from the September 5th, 2018 meeting for possible action.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, the draft minutes were not completed in time to make the packet today, so I'd like to continue this item until next meeting.
Thank you, Jim. We'll continue that to next meeting. Absent hearing an objection. No objections. We'll go on to item number 5, which is a report on the initial task to update the Truckee Meadows Watershed Management and Protection Plan for tributaries to the Truckee River. Discussion and possible recommendation to the Western Regional Water Commission for approval of a scope of work and funding in an amount not to exceed $150,000 from the Regional Water Management Fund to continue the plan update process and possible direction to staff. Mr. Wessel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As you know, this item pertains to the Truckee Meadows Watershed Management Plan update. The initial water management plan was developed in 2003, however, did not meet the eligibility requirements for 319 grant funding, which is available to communities with watershed plans that meet the 9 critical components of the, as identified by EPA. In anticipation of being able to take advantage of the EPA grant funding, the Stormwater Permit Coordinating Committee began the process of updating the watershed management plan by initiating a phase 1 gap analysis. The initial phase has reached its conclusion, and the Stormwater Committee subsequently selected NCE Consulting to complete the second phase of the project, which is the actual plan update. Here to present on the findings of the phase 1 gap analysis and the proposed phase 2 scope of work is Teresa Jones from City of Reno and NCE Consulting. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Teresa.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Teresa, do you need us to advance those for you? Is that not functioning? There. Okay.
Thank you. So for the record, I'm Teresa Jones, the coordinator for the Truckee Meadows Stormwater Coordinating Committee. This slide, back last year, we presented this slide outlining the reasons why the 2003 Watershed Management Plan for the tributaries to the Truckee River needed to be updated. And at that time, we requested your support in funding a gap analysis that we felt was needed to launch that update effort. So While I acknowledge that the gap analysis process and producing a final product has not been without hiccups, I do believe that we do have a good starting point for NCE to that provides the information needed in developing a strategy for efficient data collection and review for the development of the tributary watershed management plan for 2019-20. So in the gap analysis, 29 templates were produced for each of the tributaries within the watershed management plan that was produced in 2003. And those tributaries that were selected for this effort were chosen from the initial watershed assessment that was conducted in 2002 in support of the 2003 plan. Watershed boundaries and GIS were developed and produced, and that is important because it will work with the watershed management tool being developed by Jeremy Smith of the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency. And a table has been produced that identifies the gaps and priority needs and it takes a first stab at prioritizing the watersheds. So this slide here is one of the 29 templates that were produced in the gap analysis. Each template provides information such as the watershed map, acreage, land use, hydrologic unit code or HUC basins. It provides the 303D impairments, a paragraph on potential non-point source pollutant sources, and it has a placeholder for each of the 9 elements needed to have an acceptable EPA-approved watershed plan. And this table here, this is a first draft of the data needs template matrix provided by Stantec. It needs to be refined and reviewed and accepted by the committee. That will happen in October. It divides has 3 major categories: watershed descriptions, existing conditions, and responsibilities and resources. Within each of those 3 major categories are subcategories. In watershed descriptions, there's things such as boundaries, topography, flow measurements, flow characteristics. Within existing conditions, there are important items such as potential causes of pollution, 303 delistings, expected load reductions for watershed projects, and roles and responsibilities. There's items such as underground injection controls, industrial and hazardous waste, private property, layers, and whatnot. The numbering system is a data density system. A ranking of 1 means that all necessary data is available. A ranking of 5 means that no data is available. The data quality is color-coded. Green means that no additional effort is required to produce the data. And red, down to red, means extensive effort is required to produce the data. On the far left is the watershed priority. A first stab at prioritizing the watersheds has been taken. Again, this hasn't been reviewed by the Stormwater Committee, but green is a high-ranking priority, down to the peach is a low-ranking priority. So one of, the major outcome of the watershed management plan that has been expressed by all the stakeholders, including every member of the Stormwater Committee, is we need to have a prioritized list of projects. And these projects must build on the existing work that has been done, and they must be eligible for the 319 funds that are available each year to the state of Nevada, the larger pot that's available to strictly for EPA-approved watershed plans. The other thing that must be done is this effort must integrate with and complement and not duplicate any of the work of the Integrated Source Water Protection Plan and the One Truckee River. And so those are the major desired outcomes of the plan. And I'm going to hand it over to Deborah Limke, who is the project manager for NCE.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Deborah Lemke. We have broken this effort down into 5 tasks. The first task is project management. The majority of the work within project management is hosting meetings with NDEP, the Stormwater Committee, as well as Stantec and RCI, the resource concepts. Stantec and RCI, the critical reason for meeting with them is they have the majority of this data, the Stantec gap analysis, and then RCI has a significant amount of data from the Integrated Source Water Protection Program that they're writing. The task 2 is this complete the data review and gap analysis. As you saw on that previous table, there is still information that has not yet been compiled and or assessed, GIS data. In addition, this region, we have water quality monitoring stormwater reports and watershed tributary assessments from 2003 to current. So those reports will provide a significant amount of information for this EPA document. Based on task 1 and task 2, it leads us into task 3. What information do we still need to write this document? This EPA plan, it has a set table of contents, these 9 elements. Our goal is to get an approved EPA plan following the EPA table of contents. That then allows this region to receive EPA 319 funding. So the task 3 is gathering and finding this additional information that hasn't been yet located and or identified. Task 4 is the preparation of a draft plan. Once we have that draft plan, it goes under review. We then solicit comments from Stormwater Committee meeting, as well as NDEP, the 319 coordinator, and then we implement or incorporate those comments into task 5, which is the final document. We anticipate being done prior to June 30th. Our contract will end June 30th, 2020. Our goal is to be done before that and have everything pencils down, plan submitted to the EPA before June 30th, 2020. Any questions?
I have one, Deborah.
Yeah.
What's the benefit and capacity of the 319 funding that this would potentially allow?
What the benefit of 319 funding is, in order for a region to receive 319 funding for non-point source projects, is the region has to have an approved plan. The plan is these 9 elements. The example of the 9 elements, or what the 9 elements are, is identification of causes of impairment. It is the load reductions. So what this 319 plan does is ultimately it presents a list of projects within Washoe County, City of Sparks, City of Reno, and then this plan tells how these projects will be restored, and then those projects are then submitted for funding for the 319 funds.
Okay, and those 319 funds are federal funds?
Yes,
Yeah.
EPA federal funding.
Okay. So just for my understanding, would that be like if a person felt they needed some type of pre-treatment plant on the tributary, that funding could allow for that type of thing?
No, it's for non-point source pollution. So it's more for a bank stabilization project within a drainage way. It's not necessarily a point source. It's not for a structure with it's not for a plant, a treatment plant. It's for non-point source pollution.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Emmo?
I just had a question.
think, okay, that's better. Probably better suited for Teresa or Birgit on the timing of this effort related to the state's effort on the Integrated Source Water Protection Plan too. I'm happy to see the coordination and cooperation between the different entities. I just wanted to hear that the timing works for everybody too.
Yes, and I confirmed that yesterday with Birgit in a phone call, she communicated with RCI, and that June 30th, 2020 timeframe works well for them as
Thank you.
well.
Yes, Commissioner Wright.
What is the extent of the boundary that you're calling the Truckee Meadow watershed?
This is within the Truckee Meadows area, so within the service area of the Truckee Meadows. So essentially, it runs very closely to the Tumwa service area. So into Sparks, Washoe County, City, Reno. It wouldn't go beyond, dang, I don't have a map, but
So
it doesn't.
Is it following along the lines of the customer base, or is it actual watershed boundary?
No, it would be within, I think, the customer base. So whatever the outlines of the Truckee Meadows service area are really the jurisdictions of the Stormwater Permit Coordinating Committee that's outlined in the MS4 permit. So, but I can't give you physical boundaries.
That's fine, I just
Yeah.
was wondering if you were.
So it
going-
wouldn't go down to like as far south as Lockwood or Fernley or anywhere in those
No,
regions.
I was just thinking along the lines of the drainage itself, the physical drainage of, from the top of the mountain range down to the,
Oh, certainly, yeah. It's within, so this is a tributary plan update. So like the primary watersheds, the priority watersheds initially would be like Whites Creek, Chalk Creek, Thomas, North Truckee Drain. So those boundaries, watershed boundaries, would be associated with the boundaries of each one of those tributaries. So Whites Creek is far up as that went.
yeah,
So,
thank you.
All righty.
Yeah, yes, Commissioner Hawk.
In regards to task number 3, do you anticipate any gaps where you see there may not be any data, sub-watersheds where no data? Bill?
There may be some anticipated gaps. We believe that with Stantec's gap analysis, the 2003 data onward from the watershed assessments to current, the RCI's data that they've been compiling for the Integrated Source Water Protection Plan, that the majority of the base data will be there. It's our job to develop a monitoring program, criteria for success, and put together timelines for these projects, estimated funding for these projects. So the base data, the majority of that, we anticipate being present.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we have a public comment card from Birdjet. I'm having difficulty reading the last name, and
Absolutely.
would,
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Birgit Whittegren. I am with the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, and I'm the Non-Point Source Program Coordinator, AKA the 319 that you keep hearing. I wanted to come here and say that I'm supportive of this funding to continue this next phase in the Tributary Watershed Plan update. And I'm very heartened to see all the coordination written into the scope of work with NDEP, both the Source Water Protection Program and the watershed-based planning. And just to address the question that came up earlier, we just distributed $1 million. The press release went out today for this last round of 319 money. 200,000 of that, Truckee Meadows would have been eligible for this year, and actually some did come to this watershed. 800,000, you were not. So once this plan is approved and integrated with the Integrated Source Water Protection Plan, you'll be eligible for a much larger pot of money for those projects that you might like to fund. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Whitgren. Okay. Any, you continuing, or?
No, we're done.
No, you're done.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on this item?
I got just a comment. Having been, working with EPA for Pyramid Lake, they definitely have, the agency definitely has changed direction, and there are more requirements that are needed to base eligibility for funding. And what you're talking about with this plan, tribes in Region 9 are required to have similar type plans to be eligible. It's a ITAP. And so, I see the importance of having to establish this plan, to base eligibility for this funding. So I understand and appreciate, the work you guys are doing with regard to trying to build this plan. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? This is, I believe, an item for possible action. Is there anybody that would like to make a motion? Yes. Commissioner Enlow is, yes, go ahead.
I move that I turn on my mic. I move that the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission recommend to the Western Regional Water Commission approval of the scope of work and funding in an amount not to exceed $150,000 for this effort.
I will second.
Okay, we have a second. Commissioner Morattini. I have a question. Jim, the $150,000, how does this relate to our budget and priorities?
It's a relatively high priority, as you remember from the workshop that we did late last year, and we do have the $150,000 in a budget category that's appropriate for this project.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, item 6 on the agenda is report by the Desert Research Institute, DRI, on the last winter's cloud seeding operations for the Truckee Truckee River and Lake Tahoe basins, and alternatives for funding and operations for the upcoming winter, discussion and possible recommendations to the WRWC for approval of a scope of work and funding in an amount not to exceed $50,000 from our fund to partially support operations for the upcoming winter, and possible direction to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a real quick introduction. As you know, that we've been funding and supporting cloud seeding since 2009 from the Regional Water Management Fund. Last year, we ran a limited program because we were the only funders of the cloud seeding effort, and DRI was able to run a limited program with that funding. This year, DRI has secured state funding for the majority of the program and is proposing that the Regional Water Management Fund support the balance of that program in the amount of $50,000. So here to present on that is Mr. Frank McDonough from DRI, who's currently the operational coordinator for the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So, I'm here to give you guys a summary of what we did last winter and then talk a little bit about what we're hoping to do this coming winter. So a little review of this past winter. So here we have the Lake Tahoe Basin and the surrounding high terrain snow water equivalent traces from 2015 through this past winter. If you look, you can see the smooth red line there in the middle. That's the median amount of snow water that typically builds up over the basin. You can see that green trace, that's 2017. We all remember that one where basically the river ran bank full for a couple months. And if you look here, the black line is water year 2018. And so if you look, this is a time series starting October 1. And if you look at the black line, it's pretty much sitting right on top of the blue line up and through March 1st. And water year 2015, if you may remember, was one of the driest years ever. And things were looking pretty bleak there by March 1st, but then we got lucky and we got quite a bit of snow in March, and we actually were able to push the snowpack up to 74% of the median by late March, which turned out to be a good thing. Here's the breakout of snow water distribution by month. The plot on the left-hand side of that graph shows how much of the snowpack falls during each month of the winter and adds up to 100%. And then we can see water year 2018 on the right-hand side. And typically, for median values, November's 11% of the average snowpack falls. December, we get about 25%. January 31, February 24, and March 9%, and that adds up to the 100%. If you look at water year 18, we got pretty close to an average November, but then December really came up short. We only got 2% of the snowpack as opposed to the average 25. In January, we got another 11%. In February, we only got 4%, where we would expect 24%. But you can see in March, we actually were able to get 48% of the snowpack put down when typically we would only normally get 9%. And so that was dubbed by the Weather Service the Miracle March. For I don't know how many years in a row, these are the temperature anomalies, and here we got December, January, February, and March, and again, the temperatures were above average every month through the deep part of the winter. December +5 Fahrenheit above average. January was an incredible 8.5 above average, or January was 8.5, February 2, and March, even with all the precipitation, still ended up being warmer than average, which is pretty surprising with all the cloud cover and snowfall. Lake Tahoe's depth, this is the time series going back from October 14. The red line shows the natural rim and the green line shows the top of the dam, and you can see that we were in pretty bad shape there up until January 17, and when the lake completely filled in 17, and then we dipped down, and again, the lake was able to fill to the top this past winter, this past summer as well, and now we're sitting about 4.5 feet above the natural rim, which is probably somewhere on the order of 900,000 acre-feet of storage in Tahoe, which is good news. So I'll just give a little quick review of what cloud seeding is. So cloud seeding occurs when you have clouds that are colder than -5 Celsius, which is 23 Fahrenheit, and they contain sub-freezing water drops. These sub-freezing water drops tend to be very small. They tend to be associated with polluted air masses, which we're seeing more of from the pollution from the upstream cities in California. And these water drops are not efficient at producing precipitation. They come up over the mountains, they just float with the clouds, and then they evaporate on the east side. So we can introduce silver iodide aerosols into these clouds and create freezing events, and then these freezing events then collect the supercooled water drops and add additional snowfall along and east of the Sierra Crest, and that gives more snowpack to our watershed. The silver iodide aerosols, silver iodide, there's a picture of silver iodide. It's a naturally occurring rock. And the reason it works as a seeding element is because it has a molecular structure that's similar to ice crystals. And that allows water vapor to accrete around that structure and actually makes it easier for ice to form. And in clouds that don't have the silver iodide, it's a lot more difficult to get the initial ice crystals to form, and it takes colder temperatures. And cloud seeding's been done for 60 to 70 years in the Sierra Nevada. It's safe for the environment, and it also does not show up in any kind of examination of groundwater or soil. So you can't find the silver once seeding's been done. And in the McCollum watershed, cloud seeding's been done for almost 60 years, and there's no difference in the amount of silver in the lakes in the McCollum compared to Yosemite Park, which has never been seeded. So here's how we do cloud seeding. Here's a picture of the cloud seeding generator. All the cloud seeding solution is stored inside that trailer there. It's self-contained. And then there's a burner up on that black tank up on the top. That's where the burning occurs. And a fine stream of silver iodide, 25 grams or 3/4 of an ounce of silver iodide per hour is released out of there. And it goes up into the clouds and mixes with the water drops below freezing and creates snowfall on the mountaintops. So to summarize the project, the Western Regional Water Commission funded the project this past winter. 2017, we suspended the program in early January, so there was about 3/4 of the cloud seeding solution remaining. And so we just rolled that into this coming year, and then the Western Regional Water Commission funded the project, and Mount Rose came on board with a small contribution as well. Here's the target areas, the red shaded area. The cloud seeding generators are situated along and west of the Sierra Crest. Here's a summary of what the project did. In October and November, we got all the equipment ready and tested, got everything fully operational. December, we began informally watching the weather for seedable storms, and Mount Rose joined the program, and we actually did seed a couple of storms in December. And then the original idea was we were going to intensively work January, February, so we began the official forecast, 24/7 forecasting and equipment maintenance. So we had daily forecast discussions that if you guys want to be part of, we can send those to you. We test the equipment weekly, we fix the equipment when required, and we run the generators when the conditions are right. And we did that 24/7, January, February, and then after the week snowpack, we just extended it into March, and we at no additional cost, and that actually turned out to be a good thing. And then we kind of have to clean up part of our permits are to take all the equipment down and pull some of the generators off the site during the summer. So that's what we do in the spring and create the analysis of the project. So we ended up with 23 seeding events. We burned the generators for 524 hours, and you can see most of those were in March, although we did get some in February, and most of that was actually the last day or two of February. You can see the bleak statistics for the earlier in the year for December and January. We estimate we added about 9,600 acre feet. That may be a little under an estimate, and the cost benefit of that 9,600 acre feet was $10 an acre foot, $10.60. And then just to change those acre feet, although you guys probably know acre feet pretty well, that's about 3.3 billion gallons, and if that all came down the river, that's about 24,000 Truckee Meadows households' yearly water needs. And I just want to point out that the cost benefit didn't include the cost of the seeding solution, which was already on hand. So if we paid for the seeding solution, it would have been more about 14 an acre foot. So a little bit of validation. After the season's over, we go through all the periods that we did cloud seeding, and we take a really close look at the weather. We make sure that the winds are favorable to cloud seed and hit the Tahoe Basin target area. We need the temperatures in the cloud to be correct, and we need to see the supercooled liquid water, which is probably the most difficult part of the project is to see the supercooled water in cloud. We've developed some forecasting tools, and the camera up on Alpine Meadows, which is that lower image, you can see some ice forming on that antenna there, and that's one of our best forecast tools to find the water in the clouds. We also did some validation looking at snowpack data, and so if you look at the Tahoe map, again, the 2C locations are what we call controls, and the 2T spots are targets. And if we look at the snowpack for the winter, you can see the Mount Rose, which is in the target area, actually came pretty close to hitting the median value of snowpack. If you look over at Echo Peak, which is in the control area, they only came up at about 75% in normal. If you look at the snow lab up on Donner, again, they're well below the median, whereas at Truckee, which is in the target area, it was pretty close to the median. So that gives us some confidence that we are adding snow east of the Sierra Crest relative to the median values. We also have the snow gauge, or the precip gauge network that Western Regional Water Commission has funded. I was hoping to present some of the results from that, but the data is still pretty noisy, so I haven't been able to clean the data set sufficiently to extract any cloud seeding signal. So once I get that done, I'll submit a report to Chris and he can forward it to you guys. So I'm hoping to have that done in the next couple months, but the data was much noisier than I was hoping, so there needs to be some QC on that data. So the state of Nevada has actually come to the plate for water year 19 and funded a cloud seeding program. These are the locations that are going to be seeded: the Tahoe-Truckee Basin, the Carson, Walker. There's going to be a project in the Spring Mountains, the Ruby Mountains, and the Santa Rosa. The Tuscarora is still not sure if that's going to be a go or not, but these are the projects. The state program has sort of tried to get partnerships with local entities. The Walker River Irrigation District's come to the plate with a $30K matching fund. Down in the Mount Charleston project, the Southern Nevada Water Authority is tentatively agreed to come to the table with $45K to adopt a generator down there. And we're working to get some of the partners out in the Rubies, but that nothing's concrete at this moment. So the state-funded portion of the program for Tahoe-Truckee project, that's the full program, all the weather forecasting, all the maintenance of 3 of the generators, the reporting, pretty much full season, November 1, May 15th. And that pretty much is what the state's funding. That gives us about 11,000 acre feet on an average winter. So the state funding, though, there isn't quite enough to fund the entire 5 generator network. So what I'm coming here today is to see if the Western Regional Water Commission might be willing to adopt the 2 remaining Tahoe generators. And there's all the things that would be taken care of as far as the work to involve to adopt the generator. It's about $25K per generator, and we estimate we can put about 7,000 acre feet down, and I don't think that's $7 an acre foot's quite right. But anyway, it would be at a much lower cost than even the previous amount. So anyway, that's what we're coming. So the state program's going to fund the 3 blue line generators, and we're hoping that Western Regional would be interested in supporting the remaining 2, the Morattini and Echo generators. Here's the budget for the work at the 2 generators, and you can look at that for a second, and then I'll stop there, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions? See, Jim, I have one question. What is our budget relative to this?
We budgeted $50,000 to support the program for this year.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion. Anybody want to make a motion on this item? Yes, Commissioner Enlow.
I have a question. So Frank, on the state program, it's 3 generators for the full year. Could the state monies be used to fund all 5 of the generators for 60% of the year, 3 months out of the year?
I don't think that would be that feasible, just because the solution costs would probably exceed the forecasting costs. We're forecasting for pretty much the whole state program in one giant gulp, so that part of the program's kind of hard costs, and then each of the generators cost about $25K to fill and run and stuff. So I don't think it'd be that easy to shift the program in that way, but we could look into it.
I just know that there's maybe some different priorities that some commissioners might have for the funds that we have available this year, and don't want to put your permitting at risk on those other 2 generator sites. And I know we did a partial program last year.
Yeah.
Jim or Chris, politically, so the state now comes up with money to help do this, to support the program, and then the Western Regional Water Commission backs out of it. I mean, what message does that send, in your opinion?
Not a loaded question.
I think that if to back out and leave the entire program less than fully funded, send some kind of a message. I'm not sure who your recipient is in mind, but I think to back out completely and say, well, state, you've stepped forward again to restore the funding that was lost back in 2008. I guess you could, I think it would almost send the message that the program was valuable enough to keep running during the timing that there was no funding, but that we've got other priorities. And perhaps the state, the message would be the state should step up with more funding or something like that. I'm not sure. I'm trying to read between the lines your question.
I'm just asking your opinion.
Okay, that's pretty much it.
Got a question?
Yes, Commissioner Wright.
Your map showed the sites up in the Tahoe, the 2 sites that you're looking for the funding. And your diagram, one of your earlier slides showed the iodide being released into the clouds on the western slope and then producing snow on the eastern slope. So where they're located, is it likely that they could possibly end up in the Carson watershed?
No, we only run the generators on the southwest wind, so if you, let's see if we can go back and look. So if you look at the flow direction, that southwest wind would only push it into our watershed here. And we have 3 of them on the Sierra Crest up there, and those ones, the job of those ones is to add snow over the Carson range, and those 2 on down the hill a little ways, they're more to put snow on the east slopes of the Sierra Crest, which also adds to the watershed. So that's the design of the program, and most of the time during the storms, the winds are southwest. And if the winds become northwesterly, we shut off Echo and Morattini. We may run some of the northern ones that would hit over there by Heavenly, but most of the time, there's not much precipitation on the northwest wind, though. The real bulk of the snow falls in the southwest winds.
Okay, thank you.
See, I have a comment. Oh, yes, John? No, you go first. Okay. I think I'd like to point out that while cloud seeding was a little lower on our priority list, I think it was mostly because of the items that had greater priority, that there was a lot of those, so that we just didn't have enough enough of the little dots to put on the cloud seeding. But that being said, the commission in the past has always stressed that somebody needs to participate and help in this program. And I think the DRI has come through with regards to that, getting the state to come in and do 60% of the funding or whatever the number was you said, which is substantial. That being said, looking into this new water year, it doesn't look good as far as rainfall at this point in time. It's been dry. I think we're approaching records as far as dryness here this summer and even this fall. We're into October. At that point, it would seem that there is some possible reason that this year could be unique and funding to keep the program going at least through this year rather than waiting until we find out we hit a 2015 year again and then start praying for heavy rain, which may not come the second time. So that being said, I'll ask one more time for a motion from anybody on this item. Yes?
I'll make the
Mr. Engel.
motion just to push it through. So I move that the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission make a recommendation to the Western Regional Water Commission for approval of funding in the amount of $50,000 for the cloud seeding operations.
Okay, we have a motion. Second from anybody?
I'll second it.
Yes, a second motion? What?
Before you vote, I just had a question for qualification, because our staff report and your proposal refer to us, or the WRWC funding 2 of 7 generators, and that the state funds would fund 5 of the 7. But we're only showing 5 there.
Okay.
So is it 5 locations and 7 generators?
Yeah,
Is that the,
The
okay.
Barker and Bunker, the two that are in the middle there that the state's funding are actually dual.
There's an
So,
overlap.
Yeah, so there's, if there's a, yeah, so basically they have double. So we don't burn them at the same time, but they have double burners there.
So there are
So
7 actual
Yeah, the
generators.
state's already filled all 5 of those, and they're ready. So basically, we have 5 full generators, but we can only burn 3 at a time based on that setup there.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes, thank you, John, for that question. Okay, we have a motion and a second, and
One
another
comment, Mr.
question,
Chair.
Commissioner Martini?
So I'll be supportive this year. I'll remind the rest of the commission that in our discussions with the WRWC and amongst ourselves, we'll be looking at budgeting priorities for the next budget cycle. Frank, as we go through it, it's going to be tough for next year because we have a lot of priorities coming online, but we did budget for this year, and I think we'll see what happens next year.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure, thank you.
Okay, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
One opposition. Commissioner Wright. Motion carries. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, our next item is report on the development of outreach strategies, messages, materials, and information dissemination methods related to regional effluent management planning provided by Data Instincts Public Outreach Consultants, and possible recommendation to the WRWC for approval of a scope of work and funding in an amount not to exceed $100,000 from the Regional Water Management Fund to continue the project, and with possible direction to staff. Mr. Smitherman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of this item is to report on the Data Instincts progress to date on Phase 1 of the outreach project that you had funded prior and then, or that you had recommended funding and was approved by, well, I guess by approval of the budget, since it was a $25,000 contract. And then also to present the proposed next steps as described in the scope of work that's in your staff report. And then finally, to request a favorable recommendation to the Western Regional Water Commission for the proposal and the proposed funding. I'm going to lead this off, and then I'm going to hand it off to Lydia Perry to describe some of the details as far as the scope of work and some of the products that have been provided so far, and then she'll give it back to me to talk about the recommendation. So as far as, let's see, well, a little bit more on introducing Lydia. She's with the Washoe County Engineering and Capital Projects Division, and let's see, she's also on the effluent management team, has been working closely with Data Instincts on the tasks in the existing contract. I've been managing the contract and the budget, making sure that purchase orders are in place and that the bills are being paid. So that's kind of how the distribution of duties on managing this project have gone so far. As far as background, the Data Instincts project is one element of a broad-based feasibility study to determine if the recently revised state water reuse regulations, which establish a Category A reclaimed water standard, offers our community opportunities to diversify our water portfolio. Jen, could you advance the slides for me? I don't have control over here, but I have control of you. Thank you. The study asks some straightforward questions. So this is pretty much what I just said, probably in fewer words and more elegantly up there on the slide. So if you could advance once again, please. Thank you. The study asks some straightforward questions. Does A+ water offer benefits to our community? What are the beneficial uses for A+ water? What would be the social, economic, and environmental impacts of putting such water to use here? These are some subjects that are being answered in a companion study that's ongoing with the University of Nevada right now. Next, how could A+ water quality be achieved? So this speaks to which technologies would be necessary, and then how do we assure that A+ water is safe, sustainable, and reliable? So again, these are questions we're asking ourselves in taking on this feasibility study. And then finally, could the use of A+ water be implemented in the Truckee Meadows? How are water rights and water markets affected? And then how do we encourage public engagement? So the public engagement aspect is the nature of this particular scope of work and request, and I think that well, probably most of you, and most especially the effluent management team, have heard enough testimony from other places in the United States where there is there's a favorable and correct way to engage public in dealing with these kinds of potable reuse feasibility studies, and there are some unfavorable ways or unfortunate ways to address that, which have caused some of these project proposals to actually be stopped in their tracks. I don't know if temporarily or permanently at this point, but that is the nature and the business of Data Instincts, is to assist other entities and now us in engaging the public in bringing this kind of a feasibility study forward. So with no more comment from me, I'd like to invite Lydia up to talk about some of the details about the Data Instincts project.
Perfect. Thank you, Jim. Is this on?
Yeah,
Is
it's
it
on.
ringing? Okay, great. Okay, so Jim explained a little bit of our project. I know most of you are very familiar with the feasibility study that the region's working on. If some of you that aren't familiar, I'm happy to get with you, or Rick Warner, who speaks a lot on this, can come back and make a presentation to you. But for this, I'll primarily be focusing on the public outreach component. And this feasibility study has several components, from treatment technology studies to hydrological investigations, looking at triple bottom line economic impacts. So the University of Nevada has been crucial to looking at these different components. But the public outreach is really an important component that cannot be overlooked. Jim mentioned that a handful of other projects where the public outreach maybe wasn't a priority, and that caused issues for different programs. And really looking at educating the public, this is the primary challenge. The technology, the methods, that's for the most part pretty proven, and now we're just spending time advancing that. But when it comes to the main challenge, it really is getting out there, working with the public, and trying to educate people on what this project is really about. An example of this is Orange County Groundwater Replenishment System. That's the photo in the middle. They basically said we would talk to anyone who would listen to us. And they did thousands of public meetings. They are kind of the role model of this, of how many people they really went out and talked to. Incredibly transparent. They would have tours and would engage school children, anyone they could talk to. A lot of these projects, you can see some of the other photos, San Diego, a lot of California projects, Texas is really, the public outreach component it's the key to success for these. And you really need to spend the time working with the public. And another part of it is educating your internal staff, your elected officials, the decision makers. That's crucial. So these are just a couple of examples of some really unique, creative outreach ideas. You can make it fun. It doesn't have to be engineering-like, it can be really creative. And so these are some programs that we're looking at. And as a team, we came to this decision knowing that, hey, we've got the university, we've got these great partners, but we're all engineers, and sometimes that can be difficult to talk to the public. We want to make sure that we can have a clear, consistent message that we can have with our outreach. So, as Jim mentioned, that we brought Data Instincts online. This is a California firm. Their main guy is Mark Milan. He was actually an elected official, a mayor at some point, so he is familiar with all the different types of groups and how to speak to different groups. He works primarily only on potable reuse projects and outreach, so he has years and years of experience. His team is excellent, and really in the industry, he is the guy to go to, and we recognize that we needed his help as a region to develop material. So in February 2018, we were able to get funding from this board to develop our outreach framework and have a path moving forward. And this helped us get guidance on public meetings, and we decided that it was a good thing to brand this project. It is a feasibility study. We're doing demonstration projects, but with so many different sites and different types of studies, it's best to have a singular voice. And so we branded this the One Water Nevada. And with this, we produced, with Data Instincts, our first version of an outreach brochure. This is our outreach brochure, and it goes through with showing the different types of treatment technologies that we're considering, the different work that the university is working on, the hydrological investigations, and really our reasons. Why are we even considering this? And what are the components of this feasibility study? But we found that working with this is a very rigorous effort. We can't stop here, and we need to start engaging our own staff, decision makers, and start getting the public involved. We're working hard on getting these treatment trailers set up, and we would like to have tours for the public. But with that, we want to make sure that we have the right educational material that we can leave with members of the general public and have the right message when they come. So this scope of work that Data Instincts has helped put together, there's 4 main tasks, so I'll go through them just briefly. First is really supporting the public outreach communication needs for this project. Social media and the internet is a huge part of this nowadays, so we really need help on doing the web content, outreach material, and what is the strategy for this public awareness. Second is assisting representatives in support of our regional program. That's working with decision makers, educating our internal staff, and help with coordinating and communication in meetings. Third is stakeholder relations. We really want to work with interested parties and guidance on public meetings and workshops, and guidance on maybe some parties that aren't necessarily so interested and maybe have some opposition. And we want to work with them. We want to hear their voices, and we're happy to talk to anybody and really make sure that everyone at least has the education of our project. And the last is supporting funding strategies and initiatives. As this project, we've really reached out and secured quite a bit of funding from federal and local funding. So this would be also a great help to have some support on this. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to Jim to finish up with the recommendation, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions on this public outreach component of the feasibility study.
Okay, thank you, Lydia. To address the questions that were asked on the last two funding items, we do have this item budgeted for $100,000, not to exceed $100,000 in this year's budget, and it was among the top priorities in the priority setting workshop, as you recall. Staff is recommending that this board make a recommendation to the Western Regional Water Commission for approval of the proposed scope of work and funding not to exceed $100,000 from the Regional Water Management Fund to continue this project.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. I have a question. This 100,000 for phase 2. Are there any envisionments of phase 3, 4, 5? How many years might this go on?
I think I would envision at least one more phase, and largely because what the team has learned is that the public has to be engaged a number of years in advance of implementation of a project like this, so that they're well informed and have a bit of time to get used to the idea and warm up. And so I would think that there's a lot of education work to be done, both in the agencies, who will probably be the first in line as far as spreading the news, and then out to the general public. And then as we move through demonstration projects, pilot projects, and on into demonstrations, that's going to take a number of years. And so I think public engagement in the right timing in the right phases, along with our steps of implementation, is going to have to go hand in hand.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, this is a possible action item. Yes, John? Your mic working?
It is now. I see we were provided with some additional materials. Were you going to comment on them, or did you and I missed it?
Are you talking about the comment?
Some emails?
Yeah, I was, well, when we go into public comment for this particular item, that's when we would need to address that. I can do that right now if
I
it's
just
the
thought it
board's
would be
pleasure.
appropriate to mention this information before a vote was taken.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, would you go ahead and do that, Jim?
Okay, I'll address that now. The staff, NNWPC staff received an email from Reno Council member Jenny Breckus, and she requested that her comments be made a part of the record. So I'll go ahead and read her email into the record. It says, if you look at this agenda, there's a contract to promote the message, the One Nevada effort on this agenda. While I appreciate branding, I understand the One Nevada effort as a technical consultant contract to explore effluent management efforts, and wonder why a separate contract to message a scope of technical services is necessary. I don't sit on the Regional Water Commission, so I may not be that up to speed on the proposed add-on. The staff report did not answer why a PR campaign is necessary for a technical analysis that is preparing information for ultimately policymakers who are going to be making infrastructure investment decisions. As any effluent management decisions are going to need to involve rate setting and decisions about how costs are spread among ratepayers, I am wondering if this messaging effort will weigh into that prior to decisions being made by those with policy and fiduciary responsibilities, i.e. Reno City Council. As you know, at the most recent City Council meeting, Council decided not to pursue a contract for effluent disposal in Northern California. As an example. So that was a Long Valley Creek alternative for discharge of effluent from the North Valleys. Then she goes on to say, I am copying Mark Forey, as Tumwa is a partner to this effort also. I am also copying Jennifer, the board secretary, so that this inquiry can be incorporated into the record for the commission, as a read of the staff report raised these questions to me. And so the message was also forwarded by this Reno City manager to John Flansburgh. So he, John Flansburgh, and Mark Forey both responded. And to paraphrase their responses, engaging the public in advance is important, and giving the public the right message is important, as they will share that with other members of the public. So John Flansburgh went on to say that he was unable to be here today, but he would be voting in favor of this if he were at the meeting. So those are my comments on
Okay.
what needs to go into the record.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody have any comments on those emails? Seeing no comments on that, this is a possible action item. Is there anybody interested in making a motion at this time? Commissioner Solero.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to recommend to the WRWC for approval of the proposed scope of work and funding an amount not to exceed $100,000 from the Regional Water Management Fund to continue the project.
Okay, we have a motion. Second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Morattini. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, thank you. Next item, Mr. Smitherman, Program Manager's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first page of the staff report, the attachment to the staff report, actually, item 8A, shows, actually what it shows is that we're in transition from closing out expired purchase orders for prior fiscal years and in the process of adding this fiscal year's purchase orders, and that's why not all of the projects are showing up on the project now. But you can see that most of the projects are 0% complete, I think, that are shown with a low percentage, which would be new POs, and then there's a couple of them that are nearly 100% complete, which would be the old POs. So that kind of tells the story of where we are. But we are in the process of continuing to update the contracts for the ongoing projects, and then they will appear on this spreadsheet as the purchase orders are put into place. And then moving on to 8B, that is the financial report on the Water Management Fund itself. So we are into month 4 with this this report, and it looks like we have received about 25% of our revenue through the 1.5% fee payment. So we're approximately on track for generating the revenue that we rely on. And then you can see that our actual expenses are significantly below what our budgeted expenditures are. So we're well into the black 4 months into the year.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smitherman. Any questions on that? Seeing none, going on to item 9, discussion regarding location and possible agenda items for the November 2018 meeting, other future meetings, possible direction to staff. Mr. Smitherman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next meeting would be scheduled for November 7th, and what that would entail, if the Western Regional Water Commission is, favorable to the kind of year of meetings, especially those that would be engaging both the Western Regional Water Commission and the NNWPC, it would be the priority setting workshop. So we said that we would do that in November and then follow up with them shortly after the beginning of the year. So that would be the main item on the November agenda. Any other items that would be requested by the commission could be added to that agenda as well, but that's the only one that I have that's solid at this point.
Okay, that would be a workshop then?
That'd be a workshop with the adhesive dots.
Okay.
And we'll make sure we've got plenty of them. So
Would
you
that
can-
be at 1:30?
Yeah, that would be a 1:30 meeting. We'd probably, we might open the meeting here and then take care of any business items and then reconvene up in one of the conference rooms for the workshop. To be a little bit more casual atmosphere.
Okay.
We might have a couple of contracts for approval by this commission. I'll see how that works out.
Okay.
They wouldn't be lengthy items. The workshop will be the focus. Thanks.
Okay, this is a possible action item. Is there anybody that wants to make a motion regarding this next meeting, agenda, and workshop? I think all we need to do is give direction to staff. And so is there any other direction other than what staff is planning to do regarding this item? Seeing none, we'll see you, Jim, at the next meeting, hopefully. Next item is commissioner comments. Commissioner comments? Yes, Commissioner Enlow.
I just had one that I wanted to report that TUMO has awarded the construction contract for the Mount Rose Water Treatment Plant off of Whites Creek. And so we'll be beginning construction here within the next couple of weeks with a scheduled in-service date of late spring of 2020. So that facility is intended to really augment the groundwater supplies in the upper Mount Rose fan and try to restore those water levels. So moving forward.
If I can ask a question on that or not, John, but is that the treatment plant that was worked on by this commission 8 or 10 years ago? Or is it a new one?
That was in the South Truckee Meadows facility plan as the upper water treatment plant.
Okay, thank you. Okay, staff comments?
No staff comments, thank you.
Staff comments? Public comments, limited to 3 minutes per person. I have no public comment cards. So we'll go on to item 13, which is adjournment. We have a motion for adjournment. A second?
Second.
No, we have a second. Commissioner Wright? All those in favor? Aye. Motion opposed? None? Motion carries. Thank you.